Masechet Baba Batra Daf Pe Vav. We're talking about different ways of making acquisitions, lifting and pulling, and in what domain you're in. So the last question we had, we just have one more possible proof for that question, then we'll move on to a new question. The question that we posed on yesterday's daf was, what if you have the buyer's vessels in the domain of the seller? Meaning I bring my container into someone else's store, and the store owner fills it up. Can I acquire something in my vessel when it's in someone else's store? So far, we did not have any proof. So here's one last possible proof. Amar le Ravina le Rav Asher Tashema. The Rav Ushmael da Amre Tarvaihu. Kelav shel Adam kone lo bechol makom. Latuye mai. Lav letuye l'reshut mocher. We have a statement that Rav and Shemuel, they both agree that the vessels of a person can acquire items for him in all places. Why do they have to say in all places? What does that include? Does that not include the domain of the seller? And that means even in the domain of the seller, my vessels, I can take my own vessel there and the seller will fill it up and I will acquire it that way. Isn't that a good proof? And the answer is not necessarily. Hatam damar le zil keneh. That may, yes, it is true in such a case that bechol makom will include the domain of the seller. But that might only be in a particular case where the seller says, go and acquire it. By saying, I want you to acquire it now, I'm putting it in your vessel, and now acquire it. Because he says that, he's announcing his intention, his full da'at, that he wants it to be transferred. So yes, then it will work. But without that, not necessarily. So we do have a partial answer to our question that at least when the seller says zil keneh, then the vessels of the purchaser can acquire it on his behalf. But if he doesn't say that, we still have no proof, and that's how we leave this question. Now we have a new case. Tenan hatam. Nechasim sheyesh lam achrayut niknin bechesef ubishtar ubechazaka. Ve'she'en lam achrayut en niknin ela bimshicha. There's a Mishnah in Masechet Kiddushin. This is in a list of Mishnayot that are describing all different ways of acquiring different people and items. And it makes a distinction between land and movable items. Property that you can use as a guarantee, like for a loan, you can have a guarantee. If it's in a written loan, then there's a guarantee on land, so that you can make a guarantee on it. That means it's talking about land. So you can acquire land, property, houses with money, by transferring money, with a bill of sale, or by taking possession of it, like by using it, locking the gate, making a furrow in it. But items that you cannot use as a guarantee, meaning all movable items, can only be acquired by pulling. You have to drag it on the ground, and if you just transfer money, that's not sufficient. You have to drag it on the ground. Okay, that's what the Mishnah said. Now we're going to extrapolate something from that. Besura matnu la lehashma'ata mishmeh de Rav Chisda. Bepubedita matnu la mishmeh de Rav Kahana. V'amri la mishmeh de Rava. The following statement was said by somebody, but there's three different versions of who said it. So in the yeshiva of Sura, they taught the following statement in the name of Rav Chisda, which makes sense because Rav Chisda was the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura. So I guess in a later generation, they remembered this in the yeshiva of Sura as being taught by Rav Chisda. In Pupedita, they taught the following same statement in the name of Rav Kahana, which also makes sense because Rav Kahana was, at some point, the Rosh Yeshiva of Pumpedita. But others say that it was said in the name of Rava. Now, Rava was not the Rosh Yeshiva of Pumpedita, he was the Rosh Yeshiva in Mechoza. Okay, but in any case, it could be that multiple people said this or heard it from each other. In any case, in these two different yeshivot, they remembered the following statement in the name of two or three different sages. What is the statement? Lo shanu ela devarim she'en darkan lehagbiya, aval devarim she'darkan lehagbiya, b'hagba'in b'mshicha la. It's a qualification on this Mishnah. When the Mishnah says that movable items have to be acquired by dragging, so that comes to exclude these three things. Now, that applies only to things that you don't normally pick up. Like you have a heavy box or a suitcase or a bicycle or a big wagon, things like that, you don't normally lift. That's not the normal way that you get it from place to place. Normally, you drag it. However, if it's something that normally is carried, let's say you have a cup, a suitcase, a knapsack. These are things that you don't usually drag on the floor. That would be strange. Usually pick up. If you want to acquire something like that, I don't know, a book, then you have to pick it up. And dragging it does not work. So the idea is that picking up is a much stronger way of acquiring something than pulling. Picking up can actually work for anything. If you have a bicycle that usually you would drag along, pull on the floor, but let's say you pick it up, you can certainly acquire it by picking it up. That's no problem. Or a heavy suitcase or something like that, you can acquire it by picking it up. But the point is that if it's something that's normally dragged, then you have a choice to pick it up or to drag it. But if it's something small that's normally carried, then you have to pick it up. That's the chidush. We'll call it the chidush of Rav Chisda. Now that we have this chidush, we're going to bring 4 challenges against it. Yateb Abaye v'ka'amar leha shma'ata. Iti be Rav Ada bar matana le'Abaye. Hagoneb kis b'Shabbat chayav. Shekevan nitchayev b'gneva kodem sheyavo lidei isur Shabbat. היה מגרר ויוסה, מגרר ויוסה, פטור. שהרי איסור שבת וגנבה באין כאחד. So Abaye was sitting and repeating the statement that we just said in the name of Rav Chisda or the other, whoever sage it is. And then Rav Ada bar Matana challenged Abaye. He heard Abaye repeating this tradition, and he says, I have a question based on the following baraita that says, if a thief steals a purse on Shabbat, he is liable to pay. Why would you think he doesn't have to pay? Well, we have a law, kim le bidraba mineh, that if someone violates 2 prohibitions with one and the same action, then he only gets one punishment, the worst of the punishments, the rabbah. So if he steals something on Shabbat and he takes it out of someone's house, he breaks into someone's house and takes it out of the house, he's violating stealing, but also he's transferring from a private domain to a public domain on Shabbat, which is an Isur Melacha. And therefore he is liable to bring a korban hatat if he does it by mistake, or even sikila if he does it on purpose, or karet if there's no witnesses. So that's the greater of the 2 punishments would be sikila. So I might think that he only gets sikila, stoned, for violating Shabbat, and therefore he does not have to pay for the item that he stole. But this baraita comes to teach not so. In the case where he broke into the house, picked up the purse, he acquires it as soon as he picks it up. And so therefore it says he already is liable for the violation of stealing when he picks it up. He's still in the house. He didn't carry it yet. And that's before he violates Shabbat. So since it's at 2 different time stamps, you don't apply the rule of kim le b'draba mineh. That's case number 1. Here's the case that is relevant for us. If, however, he was dragging it, he grabbed the strap of the purse and he's dragging it out. And in that case, he's dragging it out across the outside the door into the sidewalk. Let's say the side of the sidewalk, not in the middle of the street, because you can't acquire things by dragging in the middle of the street. But let's say the simta, like the alleyway. In that case, the thief is not liable to pay for his theft, because the prohibition of Shabbat and the prohibition of theft come in the exact same instance. It's the second. When he's dragging it along inside the house, it's not his yet, because that's not his domain. Dragging means dragging it from some other domain into a domain that you have a right to use. It doesn't have to be your private domain, even an alleyway. That's how dragging works. So dragging doesn't work just by moving it an inch, unlike lifting, which is if you lift it somewhat, at least more than 3 tefachim off the ground, then that's already lifting. You don't have to lift it a lot. So in this case, he sees the purse somewhere on the floor, and he grabs the strap and he pulls it. As soon as it exits the door, he is liable for both, but he doesn't get a punishment, doesn't get 2 punishments, so he does not have to pay. Okay, that's the baraita. Now, here's the question. But look, a purse is something that's small, that you can that normally you pick up. And nevertheless, this baraita assumes that you acquire it by pulling, because the baraita says as soon as you pull it outside the door, you violate both Shabbat and you violate also stealing. But okay, you don't get a punishment for stealing because it happened at the same time. But you do acquire it, you do steal it by pulling. Rav Chisda, according to you, an item that's small like a purse that you could pick up should be that you only acquire it by picking up. So he doesn't actually violate stealing until at some point he lifts it off the ground. But and then he would be liable whenever he does pick it up. I'll say later on when it's in the street, then he'll be liable because he will not have violated Shabbat and theft at the same time. But this baraita assumes that he does acquire it, he commits the act of stealing as soon as he pulls it out into the alleyway outside of the private domain of the victim of the theft. And so you see, this baraita challenges Rav Chisda. That's the question. Amar le b'mitna. And so Abaye answers, no, we're talking about with a rope. He pulls it with a rope. So Rav Ada bar Matana says, "Ana name b'mitna ka'amina." Yes, I knew it was a rope, right? By the strap or rope, whatever. He's pulling it by the rope, and that's the problem. That's exactly my question. Abaye clarifies, no, when I said with a rope, I meant he's pulling something that requires a rope. He's not pulling just a small wallet or small purse that you could just pick up. He's actually pulling, the case of this baraita is talking about pulling a big suitcase, a very heavy item type of luggage that you cannot pick up. I mean, you could, but that's not the normal way of carrying it around. But rather, you have some kind of rope, a strap that you drag it with. That's what we're talking about. And therefore, this baraita reconciles with the statement of Rav Chisda perfectly. This is a big item that is not normally carried. And that's why pulling it is a form of acquisition, which is exactly what Rav Chisda said. Okay, that was the first. Now, second challenge, Tashema. Birshut mocher lo kana ad she'yagbihenna or ad she'yosienna mirshuto. Now we're quoting the baraita that we quoted yesterday of the 4 different domains. And the second one is if I'm in the domain of the seller. I go into his store and I want to acquire something. So I cannot acquire it unless I pick it up or I drag it out of his domain. I take it out of his domain. So what do we see from here? Alma midi de bar hagbaha ibae behagbaha kanile ibae bimshicha kanile. So it seems that this baraita is talking. This clause of the baraita is talking about one and the same item. It's an item that can be picked up. And it says, if you want, you can pick it up in order to lift it. You're the customer. Or if you want, you can drag it outside of the store. So one way or another. So you see here that this is an item that can be picked up, and yet you could still acquire it by pulling it. So that means that you can pull things across the board, even things that can be picked up. Challenge to Rav Chisda, who says that you can only pull things that are normally pulled and not things that are normally picked up. That's a good question. Answer: Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, listadin katane, midi de bar hagbaha behagbaha, midi de bar meshicha b'mshicha. No, I don't have to read this clause of the baraita like you just did. I can assume actually that it's talking about 2 cases separately, listadin. And this test says case number 1, if it's an item that's easy to pick up, that people normally carry, then you do not acquire it. The customer only acquires it by lifting it. But if it's something that's heavy, that people don't normally pick up, then you have to pull it out of the store. That's why it says, either this or that, case number 1, case number 2, and it's actually talking about 2 different items. Okay, so we resolved that one, and now the third challenge, Tashema. Hamocher perot lechavero, mashach velo madad kaneh. This is challenges from back in the Mishnah. It says if someone is selling fruit to his friend and the buyer pulls it, even though he didn't measure it, nevertheless it's acquired. He didn't measure it out. The seller didn't count them out, 1, 2, 3, or put it in a measuring cup or weigh it. But the buyer just pulled the whole thing. Nevertheless, because he pulled it, he acquired it. Now here's the question. Fruit is something that you can pick up, right? What is it? Even if it's a melon, okay, you can pick it up. Apples, you can pick them up. So, but yet it says here that he acquires by pulling. So you see, you can pull something even that is normally carried. Challenge to Rav Chisda. And we answer, Hachab maiskinan bishlife rabrebe. What are we dealing with here? With large bundles. These are big bundles of fruit, like grapes or something that you pack into a big bag, and it's a very big a crate of apples. That it's such a large bundle that it's impossible to carry, and you want to acquire the whole thing. So he pulls on it because that's the only way to do it. You cannot pick it up. But indeed, you're right. If it was a few loose apples, then he would have to pick it up. But this Mishnah is talking about a large crate, and he wants to acquire some of it or all of it, and he pulls it. Fine. הלוקח פשתן מחברו לא קנה עד שיטלטלנו ממקום זה למקום אחר. עטו פשתן בשליבי רברבה מילה עבדי. Okay, if so, they're talking about big bundles. Let's apply that to the continuation of the Mishnah that says if someone buys flax from someone else, he does not acquire the flax. It's not enough just to pay for it or to talk about the deal. You actually have to move it from one place to another. Moving from one place to another is its way of saying picking it up. Because normally when you pick it up, you're going to carry it somewhere. But technically, you don't actually have to move it anywhere. So the Mishnah says that flax is acquired by picking it up. Now, flax, don't you make it into big bundles? Can't you also make that into big bundles? But here, obviously, you're not, because it says you have to pick it up. So the flax case obviously is talking about things that are small. If this is a small thing, then it makes sense that the fruit is also small items. So if you say that the fruit has to be a large item, then say the same thing with flax. But how come the flax you can't pull? Why do you have to pick it up? And the answer is Shana Pishtan de Mishtamet. Flax is in fact different. It's packaged differently. If you put a giant package of flax, then it'll slip. It won't stay in place. So flax normally is packaged in small bundles, and that's why the Mishnah says in order to acquire flax, you have to actually lift it up. Whereas other fruits are packaged in large bundles that are too heavy to carry, and that's why the Mishnah says that you have to pull it. And actually, so this Mishnah, by making that distinction, is actually a good proof for Rav Chisda. Not only is it not a challenge, but this actually makes sense, distinguishing between fruit that is packaged in large bundles that says you can pull it, and flax that's normally in small bundles that says you have to pick it up, proves the point of Rav Chisda that distinguishes between these two different types of items. That was the third challenge. Now the fourth. אמר לרבינה לרב אשר, תשמע, בהמה גסה נקנית במסירה, והדקה בהגבהה, דיבר רבי מאיר ורבי שמעון בן אלעזר, חכמים אומרים בהמה דקה במשיכה. והבהמה דקה דבר הגבהה היא, וקטנה דקנה במשיכה. So Ravina asks Rav Asher from the following Mishnah, also back in Kiddushin, in the context of acquiring different items. And it says, a large animal, like a cow, you can't pick up a cow. So if you want to acquire it, it has to be with misira, by passing, you pass the leash over to the buyer, and then he acquires it by holding on to the leash or the harness. Whereas a small animal like a goat or a lamb is acquired by picking it up. A lamb is not so heavy, you can pick up a lamb. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Chachamim, however, disagree, and they say that a small animal you can acquire by pulling it. Certainly they would agree that you can pick it up if you feel like it, but they say it's enough, it's sufficient to just pull the little goat and you can acquire it that way. Now, here's our question. A small animal is something that can be lifted. It's not so hard to pick up a small animal, and yet Chachamim say that you can acquire it not only by lifting, but also by pulling. So that means that a small item that is easily carried, you still can acquire by pulling. That goes against Rav Chisda, that says a carryable item you can only acquire by lifting and not by pulling. That's a challenge against Rav Chisda's principle, and the answer is Shane behema desarcha. No, an animal is different because it clings. Either it clings to the ground with its feet, so it's hard to get up, or it's scratchy and it's annoying to have to carry. And so, if you have to carry a sheep, you have to save it from something. Okay, you carry it, but that's not, you don't normally carry around sheep, and it's a pain to do so. And that's why Chachamim say sheep is different from just a small purse or a book or a small item that is normally carried around. And so there's no challenge from this Mishnah either. And so we're able to defend Rav Chisda's principle against all these four challenges. We next learn another statement, and we're also going to challenge this statement from two different sources. Rav u'Shmuel da'amre tarvaihu, kor bishloshim ani mocher lecha, yachol lachazor bo afilu b'se'ah ha'acharona. This is talking about measurements, so the one ratio that you have to know is that a kor contains 30 se'ah. Now, someone says, I'm going to sell you a cord of grain for 30 coins. Now, that will end up being 1 se'ah per coin. But he doesn't give the specifics. He just says the bigger numbers, a whole cord for 30. In that case, he says, okay, they agree. And now they're filling it up. If they want to change their mind, they can change their mind until the final grain is placed on top, the final se'ah. I mean, if he's filling it up and it's in the middle, and the buyer says, you know what, forget it. He doesn't acquire it yet because he didn't finish filling it up. He said, I'm going to buy, and the other guy says, I will sell you the full cord for 30. It's all or nothing. Only if it gets filled to the top, then that's it. As soon as it gets filled to the top, the sale is final. But before that, either party can change their minds. However, Kor bishloshim se'ah besela ani mocher lecha rishon kana. If the seller made a general statement and a specific, he said, I want to sell you a cord for 30 coins, and he also said each se'ah is going to be 1 coin. Because he specified 1 coin per se'ah, as soon as he fills up 1 se'ah, the buyer acquires that, cannot change his mind. And then he fills up a second se'ah, the buyer acquires that and cannot change his mind. So that's Rav and Shmuel's thesis, that but depending on the exact language of the seller, either if he says a general language, then it only gets fulfilled. The transaction only is finalized when it reaches the top. But if he has a general and specific language, then at every marker, the acquisition goes through up to that marker. Now we have a challenge, Tashema. Imay tamida shel echad mehen rishon kana. This challenge is from back in that Braita that gave the 4 different domains, and this was talking about the first one, where it's an alleyway, and it says that if you're talking about the vessel of the buyer, he has his vessel, he puts it down there, and the seller is filling it up, then he acquires it as every time it goes in, whatever drop goes in or whatever measurement goes in, even a small amount, he acquires that amount, and therefore he cannot change his mind in the middle. Now here, this is true even though it's not filled to the top. So we're assuming that it's talking about a case where he said a general statement, I'll sell you a gallon of oil for this price. This is okay. So now he's filled up halfway. No, he doesn't acquire it yet until it reaches the gallon marker. So this is a challenge against Rav and Shmuel, because here it says that he acquires it all the way through. Every drop that goes into the bucket, he acquires it immediately, even before it gets to the top. That's a question, and the answer is Kegon damar le hin bishnem asar selaim log besela ani mocher lecha uch damar Rav Kahana shenatot hayu bahin. No, we're talking about a case in this Braita where the seller says, I'm going to sell you 1 hin for 12 coins, which is 1 log per coin. A hin contains 12 log. So it's actually talking about a case where he said the general and also the specific delineations, and therefore, since he said that, well, this is in accordance with Rav and Shmuel, who said that if you say specific language, then at every marker you acquire it. And we're talking about a case where this container contains markings, as Rav Kahana said in a different context, talking about different nesech, if you have to measure out how much wine you need. So in the Bet HaMikdash, they had jugs with different markers on it to know how much you would need for that particular korban. So shenatot, it had markings on the measuring cup, and here also we're talking about where it has markers on the measuring cup. It's a full hin if you fill it to the top, but it says log 1, log 2, and therefore once it reaches log number 1, he acquires that because he in fact did use that language. We next have one last challenge against the statement of Rav and Shmuel. Comes from a Baraita, Tashema. Hasocheret hapoel lasot imo lagoren hayom bedinar, Velagoren yafe sela asur lehanot hemenu. Okay, we're talking about a case of a farmer who's hiring a day laborer. Now, here's the thing with day laborers. There's a lot of work to do in the summer at the time of the harvest when you have to go and pick all the vegetables and the grain. There's not a lot of work to do in the winter. So the normal price for a day laborer in the winter time is just 1 dinar per day. But the price in the summer is 4 times that. It's 1 sela. Sela is 4 dinar. It's 4 per day. So here's what the farmer tells the day laborer. They're in the middle of the winter right now. And he says, listen, I will pay you now 1 dinar per day. I'm going to hire you for the summer, let's say for 30 days. I'll pay you 30 dinar, 1 dinar per day that you work in the summer. And I'm going to give you the money now. And then you'll come and work for me in the summer at that low price. And so this could be beneficial to the day laborer because he gets the money up front. He doesn't have to wait till the summer to get paid. And it's also good for the farmer because he can lock in this worker at a very low price. So if someone does that, he hires the poel, the day laborer, to work for him during the harvest season. And he pays him now 1 dinar per day. And now in the summer, the normal price would be 1 sela, 4 times as much. This is prohibited. He cannot benefit from that worker. This is not allowed because this is considered interest, because the day laborer is accepting a small amount now. It's kind of like he's taking a loan of 30 dinar. And then in the summer, he's going to be giving back work that's worth 4 times as much. If he would wait, he would make 4 times that amount, 120. And instead, he's accepting a little bit now because he's getting the money now. So this is benefiting from the time value of money. It's prohibited. Aval. However, if the farmer hires him starting from today at a continuous price of 1 dinar per day, and he says, I want you to work for me from now until the summer, through the summer, all the time. I'm going to hiring you for the next 200 days, and I'm going to pay you 1 dinar per day. Even though the normal going rate of a day laborer in the summer, in the harvest season, will actually be a sela, 4 dinar, in that case, it's permitted because he's hiring him all the way through. And so I'm hiring you now, and for the benefit of having a steady job. So he agrees to that, even though he's paying him up front. I'm going to give you 200 dinar now, but it's continuous employment. So it's different from the first case. Okay, that's the Braita. Now here's the question. ויסלקה דעתך, קור ב30 שאה בסלע, אני מוכר לך, ראשון קנה, החנמה כמה מפסק פסק, ואסור להנות ממנו. מדינה ליום, ולגורן יפה סלע מותר, עמי, והאגר נתר לי הוא. If you think, as Rav and Shemuel said, that when a seller says, I'm going to sell you 1 kor for 30, and he delineates also the particulars, which is 1 se'ah for sela, I am selling you, then he acquires it bit by bit. Every time his container gets filled with 1 selah, he acquires that already. Now this case is the same, because he didn't say I'm paying you, a large amount for all the days. He's saying I'm going to pay you just 1 coin per day. So here also, even we're talking about the sefa, where I'm hiring you now for the next 200 days, nevertheless, every day that goes by, that's it. That's an acquisition. That's its own deal. And so, therefore, it should be prohibited to use him because, let's say, okay, he's working now in the winter, right through for the next 100 days. And then, so all those days are gone. He acquired them, and it's as if they're finished already. You don't look at the whole thing as one. That's the comparison. Just like if you delineate the particulars in the case of the measurement of wheat, if you say the generalities and the particulars, then we look at each section as its own thing, not as all one acquisition. So to here, we shouldn't look at it as I'm going to hire you for 200 days altogether for one big price. If you said it that way, okay, fine. But if you're saying 1 selah per day over the next 200 days, then each day is its own small acquisition, its own business deal. And therefore, okay, it's fine to pay him and use his work during the winter when that's the going rate. But once the summer comes, you have to stop using him. It's prohibited. It should be prohibited. And yet, according to you, Rav and Shmuel, should be prohibited. And yet, the Baraita says that if you say 1 dinar per day, and also during the harvest season, even though during the harvest season is going to be 1 selah, which is 4 dinar, it's permitted. Why is it permitted? Isn't that getting benefit for the time value of money? It should be the same thing. That's the question. It's a pretty sophisticated question, right? But you got the idea. Just like Rav and Shmuel said, if you say 30 kod, that's it. You just say a generality. Okay, then you only acquire it. At the end, it's all one big deal. But if you say specifics, then it's sold 1 se'ah at a time. And the same thing here. If I would say I'm going to hire you for the whole year for 365 dinar, okay, fine. Nobody would complain about that. But if you're saying only 1 dinar per day, that means each day is its own deal. And that's okay when that's the going rate now. But in the summer, when it's not the going rate, who cares that you hired him every day before? The sefa should be the same as the resha. In the summer, that's its own deal. And he is benefiting and getting paid early for more expensive work that he's going to be doing later on. That's the challenge. We have an answer. Amar Rava, v'tizbera zilzule b'schirut mi asir, ma'ishena resha u'ma'ishena sefa. Resha dela ka'abid behadeh mehashta, mirzi ki agar netar li. Sefa de ka'abid behadeh mehashta, la mirzi ki agar netar li. Rava says, is that how you understand the Braita? Are you saying that it's prohibited to lower the hiring price? If a worker says, I'll work for you for higher, it's his prerogative to decide if he's going to work for more or work for less. And he can say, listen, I'll take less, knowing that I have a steady job throughout the next few months. So that's his prerogative to do that. That's not called interest. Now, what is the difference between the resha and the sefa? There is an important difference. In the resha, where he's not working now, he's not working at all during the winter. He's only going to start working in the beginning of the harvest season. In that case, it does look like getting advanced payment for waiting, because he's getting money now. He's not working in the meantime, and then he's going to be giving back more expensive work later on. So that looks like, even if it's technically not interest, it looks like interest, so it's prohibited. Whereas in the sefa, where he's working from now, he's getting paid now, and he's working continuously, that doesn't look like he's benefiting from the early payment. It just means he's getting paid now for a continuous job the whole time, and it's complete. So it looks like a completely different case, or rather, the optics of the case are completely different, and that answers the question. That's why, in this case, it is permitted. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.